Welcome to an amazing story that will inspire you and help improve your English skills. The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. Part 1: Early Life and Journey to South Africa. Mahatma Gandhi, one of the most influential leaders in history, was born on October 2, 1869, in a small town called Porbandar, in present-day Gujarat, India. His full name was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, but later in life, he became known as Mahatma, which means great soul. Childhood and education. Gandhi was born into a Hindu family. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was the chief minister of Porbandar, and his mother, Putlibai, was a deeply religious woman. She followed strict rituals such as fasting and praying, and her simple lifestyle had a great influence on young Gandhi. As a child, Gandhi was shy and quiet. He was not particularly strong or brave, and was even afraid of the dark. However, he had a deep curiosity and loved to listen to stories from Indian epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata. These stories taught him about truth and good behavior, which later became the foundation of his philosophy. At the age of 13, Gandhi was married to Kasturba Gandhi, a girl of the same age. This was a common practice in India at the time, but it was a life-changing event for young Gandhi. He later reflected that he learned a lot from Kasturba, who was strong-willed and independent. Throughout his life, she remained a pillar of support. After finishing school in India, Gandhi decided to become a lawyer. In 1888, at the age of 18, he traveled to London, England, to study law. This was his first time leaving India, and he faced many challenges. He struggled with English and found it difficult to adapt to British culture. He felt lonely and missed his family, but he did not give up. While in London, Gandhi was introduced to Western ideas and also explored different religious beliefs. He read books on Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam, which shaped his understanding of different faiths. He also adopted a vegetarian lifestyle, influenced by his mother's teachings. Gandhi completed his law studies in 1891 and returned to India, hoping to start a successful career as a lawyer. However, things did not go as planned. He was shy and nervous in court, making it difficult for him to argue cases effectively. His dream of becoming a great lawyer seemed to be slipping away. A life-changing experience in South Africa. In 1893, when Gandhi was 24 years old, he received an offer to work in South Africa. A businessman from Gujarat, Dada Abdullah, needed legal help for his business and invited Gandhi to assist him. Thinking it would be a temporary job, Gandhi accepted the offer, unaware that this journey would change his life forever. When Gandhi arrived in South Africa, he faced something he had never experienced before: racism. South Africa was under British rule, and there was a clear divide between white people and people of color, including Indians. Indians were treated as second-class citizens and faced discrimination everywhere. One of the most defining moments in Gandhi's life happened shortly after he arrived in South Africa. He was traveling by train from Durban to Pretoria and had a first-class ticket. However, when a white passenger saw him, he complained to the railway authorities. The officials ordered Gandhi to move to the third-class compartment because he was not white. Gandhi refused, arguing, "I have a valid first-class ticket. Why should I move?" But the railway officials did not care. They forcibly threw him out of the train at a station in the middle of the night. It was cold, dark, and humiliating. As Gandhi sat alone at the station, he thought deeply about what had happened. He realized that this was not just his problem, it was the problem of all Indians and people of color in South Africa. They were being treated unfairly, and no one was standing up for their rights. Gandhi decided that he could not stay silent. The birth of Satyagraha. After the train incident, Gandhi began to closely observe the discrimination faced by Indians in South Africa. He saw that they were not allowed to vote, were forced to carry special passes, and were treated with no respect. Instead of responding with anger or violence, Gandhi believed in the power of truth and peaceful resistance. He called this method Satyagraha, meaning the force of truth. For the next 21 years, Gandhi stayed in South Africa and led many campaigns to fight against discrimination. Some of the key events during this time were: burning of the passes. Indians were required to carry special passes to prove their identity. Gandhi organized a protest where people burned these passes as a symbol of resistance.
This was one of the first acts of civil disobedience led by Gandhi.
The Tolstoy farm. Gandhi believed in living a simple and truthful life. He started a community called the Tolstoy farm, where people lived together, worked hard, and followed his principles of nonviolence and truth. The March Against Injustice in 1913, Gandhi led a large march of thousands of Indians to protest against unfair laws. The march was peaceful but powerful, drawing attention to the struggles of Indians in South Africa. During his time in South Africa, Gandhi transformed as a person. He became stronger, wiser, and more determined to fight against injustice. He also adopted a simple lifestyle, wearing plain clothes, eating simple food, and focusing on serving others. His efforts were not in vain. In 1914, after years of struggle, Gandhi's efforts led to some changes in the laws against Indians in South Africa. Part 3: The fight for India's independence continues. Champaran and Kheda Satyagraha 1917–1918. After returning to India in 1915, Gandhi traveled across the country to understand the struggles of the people. He realized that poverty and oppression under British rule were severe, and he resolved to lead a nonviolent movement for independence. One of Gandhi's first major campaigns in India was the Champaran Satyagraha in 1917. The farmers of Champaran, Bihar, were forced to grow indigo, a crop used for dye, instead of food crops, leaving them in extreme poverty. Gandhi led a nonviolent protest and convinced the British authorities to improve the conditions for farmers. This was a significant victory and marked the beginning of Gandhi's leadership in the Indian freedom struggle. Following this, in 1918, Gandhi organized the Kheda Satyagraha in Gujarat. Farmers were suffering due to a poor harvest, but the British government refused to reduce the taxes. Gandhi led a nonviolent protest, encouraging farmers to refuse to pay taxes until relief was granted. Eventually, the British government gave in to the demands, proving that peaceful resistance could bring about change. The Non-Cooperation Movement 1920–1922. Gandhi's influence continued to grow, and by 1920, he launched the Non-Cooperation Movement. He called upon Indians to boycott British goods and institutions, refuse to pay taxes, withdraw from government jobs and schools. Millions of Indians participated in the movement, refusing to cooperate with the British authorities. Gandhi promoted the spinning of khadi hand-spun cloth as a symbol of self-reliance, encouraging Indians to stop buying British-made textiles. The movement gained massive support, but in 1922, it came to a halt after violence erupted in Chauri Chaura, where protesters set a police station on fire, killing several officers. Deeply saddened by this violence, Gandhi called off the movement, reinforcing his belief in nonviolence. The Salt March 1930. One of Gandhi's most famous acts of civil disobedience was the Salt March in 1930. At that time, the British had imposed a heavy tax on salt, making it difficult for poor Indians to afford. Gandhi and his followers marched 240 miles from his ashram in Sabarmati to the coastal town of Dandi, where he symbolically picked up a handful of salt, breaking the British law. This act of defiance inspired millions to join the struggle for independence, and the British responded by arresting thousands of protesters, including Gandhi himself. However, the movement had gained international attention, strengthening India's demand for freedom. The civil disobedience movement and Round Table Conferences 1930 to 1934. Following the Salt March, the civil disobedience movement intensified. Gandhi encouraged people across India to refuse to obey British laws, stop paying taxes, and boycott British goods. Thousands of Indians were arrested, including Gandhi. The British government, realizing Gandhi's influence, invited him to the Round Table Conferences in London in 1931 to discuss India's future. However, the talks did not result in any significant concessions from the British, leading to further protests back in India. The Quit India Movement 1942. During World War II, the British government expected Indian support, but Gandhi launched the Quit India Movement in 1942, demanding an immediate end to British rule. He delivered his famous speech, saying, "Do or die," urging Indians to continue their struggle until independence was achieved. The British arrested Gandhi and thousands of his followers, leading to nationwide protests. Despite the brutal suppression by the British, the movement created immense pressure, making it clear that British rule in India was unsustainable. India's independence and partition 1947. After decades of struggle, India finally gained independence on August 15, 1947. However, this victory was accompanied by the painful partition of India and Pakistan. The division along religious lines led to widespread violence between Hindus and Muslims, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and the displacement of millions. Gandhi was heartbroken by the violence and spent his final years promoting peace and unity. He traveled to riot-affected areas, fasting and urging communities to stop fighting. His efforts helped calm tensions, but the wounds of partition remained deep. The Last Fast and the Assassination of Gandhi 1948. Despite his efforts to bring harmony, communal tensions remain high. On January 13, 1948, Gandhi undertook his final fast in Delhi to end Hindu-Muslim violence. His fast had a profound impact, and leaders from both communities pledged to stop the bloodshed. However, just days after breaking his fast, Gandhi was assassinated on January 30, 1948, by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu extremist who opposed his philosophy of nonviolence and religious tolerance. As Gandhi collapsed, his last words were reportedly, "Hey Ram," a reflection of his deep spirituality and commitment to peace. His death was a tragic loss for India and the world, but his legacy continued to inspire future generations. The legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. Even after his death, Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence and truth continued to shape global movements for justice and human rights. His teachings influenced leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States and Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Gandhi's emphasis on self-reliance, unity, and nonviolent resistance remains relevant in modern times, proving that peaceful resistance can bring about profound social and political change. Gandhi's principles of ahimsa, nonviolence, and satyagraha, truth and resistance, remained a guiding force for movements advocating peace and justice worldwide. His legacy serves as a reminder that truth, love, and perseverance can change the world.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe this channel and enjoy learning English.